Most people walk past a royal guard and see a costume, a tall hat, a red coat. A man so still he barely seems to breathe. They see theater, pageantry, a prop in someone else's holiday photo. They don't see the 12-hour shift, the knees that have locked and unlocked 1,000 times without complaint, the eyes that are trained, not just told, to find the one face in 1,000-strong crowd that doesn't belong. They don't see what I saw that Tuesday. A child of maybe 9 or 10, expensive trainers, a mother on her phone, all the confidence that money buys too early, walked up to Guardsman Thomas Ellery and decided, in front of 3 dozen tourists and 2 foreign diplomats, that the rules simply did not apply to him. What happened next didn't make the evening news. It didn't need to. The people who were standing close enough to see Ellery's eyes, really see them, haven't stopped thinking about it since. Neither have I. And I was the one holding the incident log. The logbook was already 3 pages deep by 9:30 that morning, and my pen hand was cramping in the way it does when the weather turns damp and the tourists come in waves thick enough to feel like a tide. I was posted at the inner observation station, not a glamorous position, if I'm being honest about it, more of a glass-sided cupboard overlooking the public forecourt. And my job, on paper, was crowd assessment, behavioral monitoring, logging anything that warranted a notation. In practice, my job was watching people be idiots and deciding how much paper their idiocy deserved. Most of it didn't deserve much. A woman trying to touch Guardsman Fitch on the bearskin. He'd clocked her at 40 yards and made the micro-adjustment that redirected her hand without her even realizing she'd been redirected. A man in a Manchester United kit who'd gotten a bit too close to the East Post and needed a look. Just a look, from Sergeant Adeyemi to remember that his feet had legs, and his legs worked fine. The usual choreography of a public access morning at St. James's. Then the boy. He arrived with the 10-15 cluster, a tour group mostly, sprinkled with independent visitors, and 1 family unit comprising a man absorbed entirely in a paper map, a woman absorbed entirely in her phone, and a child of roughly 9 or 10 who was absorbed entirely in the project of being uncontained by the world. So he was the kind of child you can identify at distance, not by size or dress or any single feature, but by the quality of his movement, that particular loose-limbed swagger that certain children develop when every room they've ever entered has rearranged itself around them. He moved through the forecourt like someone who'd been told about rules the way you're told about weather in countries you'll never visit, academically, theoretically, with no expectation of personal impact. Then Guardsman Thomas Ellery was at the North Post. I've logged Ellery's name more times than any other guardsman on the rotation, not because he causes incidents, quite the opposite, but because Ellery is the kind of soldier your eye returns to without knowing why, the way a room returns your gaze to its heaviest piece of furniture. He is 6'2" in his boots, and moves like he was assembled rather than born, each component settled exactly into its structural purpose, nothing wasted, and nothing decorative. The bearskin adds another foot of presence. His face, when he's at post, is what I've come to privately think of as operational neutral. Not blank, not rigid, but the way a very deep body of water looks still from the surface. That Tuesday, Ellery had been at post for 4 hours and 11 minutes. I know because I log the rotation times, because logging is the thing I do when my hands need occupation and my mind needs somewhere narrow to go. The boy crossed the cordon line, not the outer boundary that he'd respected, barely. The inner one, the physical one, the one marked by the stone and the chain and the collective understanding of every adult within eyeline that you simply do not breach it. He ducked under the chain with the casual athleticism of someone who had never once considered whether a thing was permitted before doing it, And he walked, not crept, not scurried, right up to Ellery's post. His mother did not look up from her phone. I reached for my radio. Then I stopped, because something about the angle of Ellery's posture, some increment of shift too small to name but not too small to register, told me to wait. Not stand down. Wait. The boy stopped approximately 14 inches from Ellery's left boot. He tilted his head back. He looked up the length of the guardsman, the way you look up a building when you're trying to find its roof, someone with that particular combination of assessment and contempt that belongs exclusively to children who haven't yet learned that contempt has consequences. "Hey," the boy said. The forecourt did not quiet. It had no reason to. 30-odd tourists, 2 diplomats in conversation near the south gate, a group of school children with a fraying teacher at their edge. None of them were watching. Yet. Ellery did not respond. "Hey," the boy said it louder this time, with an emphasis that landed like a jab. The emphasis that means, I know you can hear me. I'm making you respond. I'm talking to you. The bearskin didn't move. The eyes, I had a clear line to Ellery's face from my station, tracked forward, above and past the boy, somewhere in the mid-distance, where guardsmen keep their gaze when the world is misbehaving and the protocol is patience. The boy looked back at his mother. She was typing something. Thumbs going. Gone. He looked back at Ellery, and this is where it shifted, where the thing I've been trying to articulate to myself and failing for 2 weeks now, the thing that made me set down my pen and stop logging and simply watch, where it started. The boy reached out and flicked Ellery's coat. Not a touch, a flick. The gesture you use on a thing you're testing for a reaction, a sleeping animal, a hot surface, a person you're not entirely sure is real. The forecourt was still oblivious. Ellery's gaze moved, not his head, so not his body. His gaze, those operational neutral eyes dropped, slowly, and with the deliberate quality of something that has decided it is time to descend, from the mid-distance down the 12 inches of air between them until they were looking directly, fully, and with absolute completeness into the boy's face. The boy's hand was still extended from the flick. He did not withdraw it. He would not give that up, I think. And something in him had decided, in the way that certain children decide things, with the total commitment of someone who has never paid for a decision, that he wasn't going to be the one who moved first. Ellery looked at him. I want to be precise about what that looked like, because I've replayed it in the way I replay things that I can't fully account for. It was not a glare. It was not a warning. It held no performance of authority. It had none of the puffed-up theatrics that lesser men use when someone half their size challenges them. It was something quieter and more absolute than that. It was the look of a man who has stood in every kind of weather, absorbed every kind of pressure, maintained his post through things that would unmake most people, and who is now, finally, making an exception. Making an exception, not with his voice, or his body, or his rank, but with the focused application of his entire, undivided, so absolutely unblinking attention. The boy lowered his hand. The tourists nearest the post began, one by one, to notice. The school group went quiet, not shushed, not instructed, just quiet. The way children go quiet when they sense that something adult is happening, something that doesn't have a name they've been taught yet. The mother looked up from her phone, and the boy, 9 or 10 years old, expensive trainers, the whole world rearranging itself around him his entire brief life, took one step back. Just one. But he took it. I wrote it in the log. 3 words. Ellery. Eye contact. Sufficient. I underlined it. I have no idea why. It felt like it required underlining. The tour group moved on. The diplomats resumed their conversation. The school group's teacher exhaled something she'd been holding across her entire ribcage, and the morning reformed itself around the 11:15 rhythm like nothing had broken its surface. But I'd watched a 9-year-old meet something he had no word for and find his feet moving backward before his brain had authorized the movement. I set down my pen. I thought about what it takes to become that still, what it costs, whether the cost is something you choose or something that happens to you slowly between one rotation and the next, without your fully realizing the exchange has been made. Ellery had not moved a single inch. He was back in the mid-distance, eyes forward, operational neutral. The chain still swayed faintly from where the boy had ducked under it. I didn't log the afternoon the way I should have, not because nothing happened. Plenty happened. The standard procedural tissue of a midweek public access day, on 2 noise complaints, and a lost child reunited with his father, and a heated disagreement near the south gate about whether a tripod counted as a restricted item. But because my attention kept returning north, kept finding Ellery at his post, kept snagging on him the way a sleeve snags on a door handle, briefly, unexpectedly, and with an irritating suggestion that something has been left incomplete. I'm the kind of person who finishes things. My flat is clean. My logbook is current. I eat the whole meal, not most of it. Whatever had happened that morning felt like most of it. At 1400, Sergeant Adeyemi came up to the observation station for a check-in, which was the polite institutional word for the part of the day where he sat down uninvited and we argued about the logbook entries. Adeyemi has been in the regiment longer than I've been in the service. He is the specific kind of experienced that doesn't need to tell you it's experienced. It just moves differently, doesn't rush, doesn't overcorrect. He looked at my 3-word entry. Ellery, eye contact, sufficient. He read it in the flat, toneless register he uses when he's about to say something worth hearing. He set the log back down. You watch that. It was loggable. Was it? It wasn't a question quite. It was the thing Adeyemi does when he wants you to hear what you just said through different ears. I picked up my pen, put it back down. The boy crossed the inner cordon, I said. They all crossed the inner cordon. He made physical contact with the guardsman's coat. They all make physical contact with the coat. He leaned back. The chair creaked in the way the chairs in the observation station always creak, as if the building itself is expressing mild protest. You're logging the eye contact specifically. It was. I stopped. Turned the word over. Specific. Adeyemi nodded once in the way that means he already knows what you're working toward and is giving you the courtesy of arriving there yourself. Ellery did something today that I can't fully classify, I said. He stood still. It wasn't just standing still. Adeyemi looked out through the observation glass at the forecourt below. The afternoon rotation had shifted. Guardsman Pierce was at the north post now. And the tourist clusters moved around him with the same flowing indifference they moved around all the posts, all the red coats, all the still men who were furniture, until someone looked too long. Ellery's been here 11 years, Adeyemi said, after a silence I'd stopped trying to fill. Do you know what that is? A long time. It's 4,015 days if you don't count the 2 he took when his mother died. He said it without emphasis, just to mention. And that is 4,015 times standing in a forecourt where every single person who walks past has made a decision about who you are before they've reached you, before you've spoken, before you've moved. They've decided you're a statue, a tradition, a prop. He paused. Some of them decide to test whether that's true. The boy today wasn't the first. He wasn't the 50th. I looked at my 3-word entry again. It suddenly seemed both too small and precisely right. What does it do to a person? I asked. 11 years of that. Adeyemi's expression shifted. Not much, just enough. The way a wall shifts when you press on a certain point and find that it is, in fact, a door. "Ask him," he said. He stood, straightened, took the logbook, and left me in my glass cupboard with the ambient noise of the afternoon filtering up from below. I did not ask Ellery. Not that day. The rotation ended at 16:30, and I watched him come off post the way I'd been watching guardsmen come off post for 3 years. The stiffness in the first few steps, the way the body re-inhabits itself after hours of imposed stillness, shoulders dropping centimeter by centimeter back toward the human. A thermos appeared from somewhere. He drank from it without looking at anything in particular, which I had come to recognize as the face a person makes when they are auditing their own interior for damage. I gathered my log sheets and took the long route back toward the administrative block, because the long route goes past the guardroom, and I'm a person who calls things professional interest, when the more honest word is the kind that doesn't fit well in logbook entries. Through the guardroom window, I caught 10 seconds of the end of a conversation between Ellery and guardsman Meta. Meta, who is 23, and still has that quality of earnest application that the regiment either refines or breaks within the first 18 months. Meta was talking, something gestural and animated. Ellery was listening with the particular brand of stillness that is not post-stillness, but rather the stillness of someone choosing to give their full attention as an act of deliberate generosity. Then Ellery said something I couldn't hear through the glass. 3, maybe 4 words. Meta laughed, not politely, not performatively, but the real kind, the involuntary kind. The kind that starts in the chest and arrives in the face before the face has had a chance to prepare an appropriate expression. I stood there for longer than was warranted. I kept thinking about the boy, about that single step backward, about the thing in Ellery's eyes that I'd written down as sufficient because I didn't have a better word, not because it was the right one. And I kept thinking about Adeyemi's number. 4,015 days. Each one a small referendum on whether you existed, conducted by strangers with cameras who never waited for the result. Each one demanding you remain intact, formally, visibly, entirely intact, while the world decided you were architecture. What does a person build out of that? I went back to the logbook that evening. I turned to the 3-word entry. I added a 4th. Ellery. Eye contact. Sufficient. Reevaluate. I don't know entirely what I meant to reevaluate. Whether it was the entry, or the classification, or something sitting further back and less comfortable in the architecture of my own assumptions about what I was watching every day from behind observation glass. I went home. The flat was clean. The logbook was current. I lay in the particular dark of a person who has looked directly at something and is no longer entirely sure of the shape they thought it had. The next morning, I arrived early. Ellery was already at post. It was 6:48. The forecourt was empty of tourists. The city was doing the thing it does before it fully wakes, that gray provisional quality, everything potential and nothing yet decided. The stones were damp. The flags were flat. He was still. Not rigid, not performing stillness, just genuinely, architecturally at rest inside the position, the way a river is at rest when it isn't in flood. Nothing fighting anything. Just the man and the post and the forecourt and the morning, and the bearskin's shadow falling long across the wet stone. I stood at the observation glass with my pen uncapped and my logbook open. I didn't write anything. I watched him breathe. The second incident happened on a Thursday. Not dramatic. Not flagged. Not, technically, an incident at all in any register I could justify to the oversight board. Which is exactly why it settled into me the way it did. Sideways, below the official threshold, are in the place where the things that matter most tend to arrive precisely because they fit no established category. I'd been eating a sandwich at the observation glass when the family appeared at the north post. Different family, different configuration. a grandmother in a coral-colored Mac, two adults who moved around her with the gravitational care that means recent illness or very old worry, and a girl of maybe 6 or 7 riding her father's shoulders, with her hands gripping the top of his head like handles. With them was a boy. Not the same boy. I want to be precise about that. This was a different child entirely, smaller and darker-haired, and wearing a coat with a hood shaped like a fox that had the immediate effect of making him appear approximately 30% more human than the average person. He was maybe 7. He held his grandmother's hand and moved with the particular careful quality of a child who has been told something important about today and is trying to honor the information. They stopped at the North Post. Ellery was there. Of course Ellery was there. I have begun to suspect I have developed a kind of observational bias around Ellery that I cannot fully account for in professional terms, but which I have decided to treat as a data collection habit until I arrive at a better explanation. The grandmother was talking to the adults. The girl on the shoulders was watching a pigeon. And the small boy in the fox hood was looking at Ellery with an expression I'd seen on no face before. Not the calculation of the first boy, not the tourist curiosity of the camera carriers, not the elaborate performance of ignoring by staring that adults do when they're pretending they haven't noticed. This was something simpler. He was looking at Ellery the way you look at something that confuses you, and that confusion is not threatening but is pulling, genuinely pulling, at some interior thread of inquiry you don't have words for yet. He let go of his grandmother's hand. Adeyemi was going to appear in my logbook again. I could already feel the entry forming. But I held my pen. The boy walked up to the cordon. He stopped exactly at it, right at the edge, toes touching the stone line, and hands clasped behind his back in an unconscious mirror of an at-ease stance that made something catch briefly in my chest. He looked up at Ellery. "Excuse me," he said. Quite small. Quite clear. The adults hadn't noticed. The grandmother was mid-sentence. The girl was still negotiating with the pigeon situation. Ellery's eyes didn't move. The boy waited. Clasped hands. Fox hood. Patient in the way that certain children are patient. Not performing patience. Not marshalling it as a tactic. I just genuinely untroubled by the gap between asking and receiving. He had asked. He would wait. The waiting was fine. 30 seconds, maybe. The forecourt breathed around them. And then Ellery's eyes moved. The same descent I'd logged on Tuesday, from the mid-distance, deliberate, full, but carrying a different cargo entirely. No warning in it. No pressure. Something else I've been turning over and failing to name. His gaze arrived on the boy's face and stayed there, on whatever had been operational, neutral shifted by the smallest possible fraction into something that was still professional and still correct and still absolutely within the parameters of the position. And yet, different. The boy's face opened up. "Do you ever get lonely?" he asked. "The forecourt, the pigeons, the coral Mac." I stopped chewing my sandwich. The question sat in the air between them, with the terrible simplicity of questions that children ask before they've been taught, that certain truths are considered impolite to reach for openly. It wasn't cheeky. It wasn't a challenge. It was just honest and direct, and aimed with the unself-conscious accuracy of someone who has not yet learned to protect people from their own interior by pretending it doesn't exist. Ellery was not permitted to respond. Not by regulation, not by protocol, not by the 11 years of accumulated professional discipline that had made him the specific person he was on that post on that morning. He knew that. He had always known that. His jaw moved, just slightly, just once. A tightening and releasing of a muscle beneath his cheek that lasted perhaps a quarter of a second and was entirely invisible to anyone not specifically studying his face from an elevated observation station with an unhealthy logbook habit. I saw it. The boy's grandmother called his name. Matthew. I think Matthew. The acoustics were imperfect, and the small hands unclasped from behind his back, and he turned with the easy compliance of a child who has never needed to be told twice, and the family reformed around him, and the Coral Mac moved south toward the main gate, and the Fox Hood bobbed away through the mid-morning crowd until it was just another small shape in the general human texture of the forecourt. Ellery's eyes went back to the mid-distance. I put my sandwich down. I thought about the jaw, the quarter-second of muscle. I thought about Adeyemi's 4,015 days. I thought about the 11-year accumulation of people who had decided, in their various confident ways, what Ellery was and what he wasn't. Prop, tradition, statue, challenge, photo opportunity, test subject, and about the fact that a 7-year-old boy in a fox hood had walked up to the cordon, and stopped exactly at the line, and asked the one question that all of those people, in all of those years, had never thought to put directly at him. I opened the logbook. I wrote, T. Ellery, North Post, 1047. Public interaction. No breach. No incident requiring notation. I looked at it. I crossed out the last sentence. Not because it was inaccurate. By every applicable standard, it was entirely accurate. But because in the column of my own private record, the one I keep alongside the official one and will never submit to oversight, the sentence was the least true thing I'd written in 3 years. Then I wrote 4 more words beneath the official entry, in the margin, in letters small enough that they'd require a deliberate choice to read. He almost said yes. I don't know if I'm right about that. I'm not entirely sure it matters whether I'm right. What I know is this. On a Tuesday, a boy with expensive trainers and the whole world arranged around him walked up to Thomas Ellery and found, for the first time in his brief experience of the world, that something did not move when he pushed it. And on a Thursday, a different boy in a fox coat walked up and asked, out of simple human curiosity, whether the standing still felt the way loneliness feels. Same man, same post, same forecourt, same stones, same mid-distance gaze. 2 entirely different collisions with the same truth. The afternoon rotation came. Ellery stepped off post. I watched him take those first stiff steps, shoulders resettling, the thermos appearing from somewhere. He stopped for a moment near the east wall, not for long, a beat, maybe 2, and he put one hand flat against the stonework, just held it there. Then his hand dropped, and he kept walking, and I sat at the observation glass and tried to decide whether that was a man steadying himself or a man saying something to something solid that would never answer him back. I logged neither interpretation. Some things don't belong in the record. Some things belong to the person still standing when everyone else has walked away. I closed the logbook. I capped the pen. Outside, the forecourt was doing what it always does between the tour group clusters, breathing itself back into a kind of emptiness that is less empty than it looks, populated with what the morning left behind. The echo of the boy's question, still apparently hanging in the air above the north post, waiting for an answer that protocol would never permit, and Ellery's jaw had almost fractionally begun to give.